to the devil and his juice. Alright, Genesis chapter 2, verse 8. The Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground the Lord God made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. I'm going to skip verses 10 through 14 because they just talk about the rivers and the garden and where exactly the garden was in the Middle East. So, okay, 15. Then the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend to keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die. And the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him. Out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the air, and brought them to Adam, to see what he would call them. And whatever Adam called each living creature, that was its name. So Adam gave names to all cattle, to the birds of the air, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper comparable to him. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs, and closed up the flesh in its place. Then the rib which the Lord God had taken from man, he made into a woman, and he brought her to the man. And Adam said, this is now bone of my bones, and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother, and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. Alright, life in God's garden, right? So, God took Adam, put him in his garden, made a rule for him, don't eat of this tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which kind of cancels out what the whole purpose of the tree is, knowledge of good and evil. So basically what God is saying is, it's good of you not to eat of it. But you don't know what good and evil are because you can't eat of the knowledge of good and evil. So, telling him what to do, but Adam not having any idea of what he's not supposed to do, which is good. It's kind of illogical, right? And speaking of logic, how much knowledge did God or Adam have, right? He was obviously smart enough to name every creature of the earth, right? Which God recreated, because in the first 6 days of creation, he made the animals of the earth. So now he's remaking them and popping them back up out of the ground, right? And also with the trees, he made them in the first 6 days, but now he's popping them up out of the ground again. I guess you could say he just popped them out of the ground in the garden. But still, if you already, it's kind of redundant. You already made it over here. Wouldn't it be made over here in the garden? And so, yeah, he's smart enough to do that, but how far did his intellect go? Did he have a concept of mathematics? He obviously spoke a language. Who knows what it was, right? How good were his linguistic skills? He spoke the same language as God, which begs the question, what language did they speak? Adam would have to know something about horticulture if he's going to take care of this garden, right? Because see, our knowledge as humans is derived from short-term to long-term memory, right? So, based on our experiences from our youth to now, we learn, and we are constantly learning from experience, from memory. So if Adam didn't have a memory before the day he was created, God had to have imparted some kind of knowledge into him, right? So would the concept of good and evil come from God's knowledge? Then God should have kind of put that in his mind that it's evil to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Anything he would have needed from that should have already been in his mind. So it just doesn't make sense. God is, like I said, he's illogical in the way he works in this. And them being naked, well, they wouldn't know they were naked unless God put that knowledge into them, right? Unless it was imbued in their brain, hey, you're naked, you don't have clothes, you see all her junk, she sees all your junk, we're all good, you know. So, yeah. Anyway, moving on. The temptation and fall of man, right? Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God has made. And he said to the woman, has God indeed said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden. But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. Then the serpent said to the woman, you will not surely die, for God knows that in the day that you eat of it, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. Okay, so they obviously, according to this, and I love this, chapter 3 of Genesis. That's when we meet our antagonist, right? Which my philosophy is the serpent's kind of the protagonist because he introduces them to knowledge, right? To intellect, right? God is the protagonist to most people in this book. But anyway, we meet the serpent, the antagonist, and he tells the woman, hey, you won't die. You'll gain just as much knowledge as God. You'll be like him. So it kind of makes God the liar then, right? If they won't die when they eat it. And God said it right there, you know, in black and white. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. So here's the serpent, who is the wisest, the most cunning of any beast, right? To be cunning, you have to have some kind of intellect or wisdom, right? So they eat of it, and their eyes are open. They are now aware of good and evil, which God told them will be good of them not to eat of it. So now they're aware of good and evil, which God could have just put in their mind from the get-go what good and evil are. Supposedly, if evil is going against God and good is for God, you kind of should have put that in Adam's mindset. So they made fig leaves for clothes because they saw they were naked, even though they really shouldn't have been ashamed of each other if they were man and wife, right? I mean, I know it may be anecdotal, but I never got ashamed when I was naked in front of my wife. She never got ashamed in front of me. And you really shouldn't be if you're in a marriage. You shouldn't be ashamed of each other and be naked. Typically, people aren't. Most marriages, you're not ashamed of each other. But they were ashamed. They have this knowledge, hey, I see her junk, and it's not covered. So, and she sees my junk. Holy shit. Even though she's seen my junk for quite a while now. So, I'm going to leave it off at this. That now their eyes are open. They have some kind of wisdom or intellect, whatever you want to call it. They know what good and evil are. And they know they're naked, and they know how to sew things. So I guess that's part of the answer is part of my question of how much knowledge did Adam have, because they know how to sew. And we'll come back to God dumping all the responsibility on them, because he's kind of a horrible father figure at this point. So, to the devil and his juice.